The gavel struck like a thunderclap, splitting the silence of the courtroom. Ethan Harper, 28, stood frozen, his heart pounding as he faced his father across the room, a man who'd stolen everything his mother left behind. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming her memory from a liar's grip. Ethan's fingers trembled as he clutched the edge of the plaintiff's table. The air in the small-town Ohio courtroom was thick with tension, the kind that clung to your skin and made every breath feel like a fight. His father, Richard Harper, sat smugly on the defense side, his tailored suit a stark contrast to Ethan's threadbare navy blazer, bought secondhand for this very day. Richard's eyes, cold and unyielding, hadn't met Ethan's since the lawsuit began. To him, Ethan was no longer a son, just an obstacle. It had been 6 months since Ethan discovered the truth. His mother, Clara, had died 5 years ago, leaving him a modest inheritance, a small house, a savings account, and her beloved collection of vinyl records. But Richard, her widower, had claimed it all, citing a will Ethan had never seen. When Ethan demanded answers, Richard's response was a slammed door and a lawyer's letter. So here they were, in a courtroom in Dayton, fighting over what was rightfully Ethan's sand. More importantly, what was Clara's? The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Harper," she said, addressing Ethan, "you claim your father forged your mother's will. Present your evidence." Ethan's lawyer, a kind-eyed man named Caleb Monroe, slid a folder across the table. Caleb was 30, with a quiet intensity that made Ethan feel oddly safe. Even in this storm, they'd met 3 months ago when Ethan, desperate and broke, walked into Caleb's pro bono legal clinic. Caleb had listened to Ethan's story, how Richard had manipulated Clara's estate, how Ethan had nothing left but memories and promise to fight for him. Now, Caleb's steady hand opened the folder, revealing bank statements, property deeds, and a handwriting analysis that suggested Clara's signature was forged. "Your Honor," Caleb began, his voice calm but firm. "These documents show discrepancies in the alleged will. Clara Harper's signature doesn't match known samples, and the estate's transfer to Richard Harper occurred under questionable circumstances." Richard's lawyer, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, scoffed. "This is speculation. My client acted within his rights as Clara's husband." Ethan's jaw tightened. Husband. The word felt like a betrayal. Clara had been more than Richard's wife, she'd been Ethan's confidant, his anchor. She'd taught him to love jazz, to question authority, to stand up for what was right. And now, Richard was erasing her, claiming her life as his own. As the lawyers sparred, Ethan's mind drifted to the last time he'd seen his mother. She'd been frail, her red hair dulled by illness, but her green eyes still sparkled with defiance. "Don't let anyone tell you who you are, Ethan," she'd whispered. He hadn't understood then. But now, standing against his father, he felt her words burning in his chest. The judge called a recess, and Ethan stepped outside, the Ohio autumn air biting his face. Caleb followed, his gray sweater a soft contrast to the harsh fluorescent lights of the courthouse. "You okay?" Caleb asked, his hazel eyes searching Ethan's. Ethan nodded, though his stomach churned. I need to know why he did it. Why he took everything she wanted me to have." Caleb placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. A brief, grounding touch. "We'll get there, one step at a time." Back in the courtroom, the tide began to shift. Caleb presented a witness, an old friend of Clara's named Margaret, who testified that Clara had confided in her about changing her will. She wanted Ethan to have the house. Margaret said, her voice trembling. She said Richard wasn't who he seemed. Richard's face darkened, But he said nothing. Ethan's heart raced. What did Margaret mean? What secrets had Clara kept? As the day ended, Caleb handed Ethan a small, sealed envelope. Margaret gave me this, he said. It's from your mother. She asked Margaret to hold on to it until the time was right. Ethan's hands shook as he took the envelope. It was addressed to him in Clara's looping handwriting. He didn't open it, not yet. The weight of it felt like a promise. Or a warning. Whatever was inside, Ethan knew it would change everything. That night, in his cramped apartment, Ethan sat on the couch, the envelope unopened on the coffee table. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of traffic outside. He thought of Caleb, of the way his steady presence had anchored him today. There was something about Caleb, his quiet strength, his belief in Ethan's fight that stirred something unfamiliar in Ethan's chest. Not now, he told himself. Not with so much at stake. He picked up the envelope, his fingers tracing his mother's handwriting. Whatever truth lay inside, Ethan wasn't sure he was ready for it. But he knew one thing. He wouldn't stop until he'd reclaimed his mother's legacy and her secrets. Ethan stared at the envelope, its edges worn from years of being hidden. The weight of his mother's handwriting felt like a tether to her, pulling him back to a time when her laughter filled their small Ohio home. He couldn't open it, not yet, but its presence burned, demanding answers. The next morning, Ethan met Caleb at a diner near the courthouse. The place smelled of coffee and grease, its red vinyl booths worn but comforting. Caleb sat across from him, sipping black coffee, his hazel eyes catching the morning light. Did you read it? Caleb asked, nodding toward the envelope Ethan had tucked into his jacket. Ethan shook his head. I don't know if I'm ready. What if it's something I can't handle? Caleb leaned forward, his voice low but steady. Whatever's in there, it's from her. She wanted you to have it. That means something. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. Caleb's belief in him was a lifeline, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this fight. Over the past 3 months, their late-night strategy sessions and shared cups of bad coffee had built a quiet trust between them. Ethan wasn't sure what to call it, friendship. Maybe something more, but it was enough to keep him going. Back in court, the air crackled with new tension. Caleb called another witness, a bank manager who'd overseen Clara's accounts. The manager, a wiry man with glasses, testified that large sums had been withdrawn from Clara's savings just days after her death transfers authorized by Richard. It was unusual, the manager said. Mrs. Harper had always been meticulous about her finances. These transfers, they didn't feel right. Richard's lawyer objected, calling it circumstantial, but the judge allowed it. Ethan watched his father shift in his seat, his composure slipping. For the first time, Richard looked nervous, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they were getting closer to the truth. During a break, Ethan slipped into the courthouse hallway, the envelope heavy in his pocket. He found a quiet corner and tore it open, his heart pounding. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly, and a small, faded photograph. The letter began, "My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're fighting for what's yours. I'm so sorry for the pain this will cause, but you deserve the truth. Your father isn't the man you think he is, and neither was I." Ethan's breath caught. The photograph showed his mother, Clara, laughing under a willow tree, her red hair glowing in the sunlight. Beside her was another woman, blonde and radiant, her hand resting on Clara's arm. They looked happy, in love. Ethan's mind reeled. Who was she? The letter continued. Her name was Lily. She was my heart, my secret. Your father found out, and it broke us. He kept me from you, from her. But I left you everything to make sure you'd be free. Find her, Ethan. She knows the rest. Ethan's hands shook. His mother had loved another woman. The revelation hit like a tidal wave, reshaping every memory he had of her. Clara's late-night phone calls, her guarded smiles, the way she'd sometimes stare out the window with a longing Ethan couldn't name, all made sense now. But why had she hidden this? And what did Richard know? He returned to the courtroom, dazed, the photograph tucked into his pocket. Caleb noticed his expression and leaned close. "What's wrong?" Ethan hesitated, then passed him the letter. Caleb read it silently, his eyes widening. This changes things," he said. "We need to find Lily." The rest of the day blurred as Caleb presented more evidence, emails between Richard and a shady estate lawyer, records of offshore accounts. Each piece tightened the noose around Richard's lies. But Ethan's mind was elsewhere, caught on his mother's words. "Find her, Ethan. She knows the rest." That evening, Ethan and Caleb sat in Caleb's tiny office, poring over old address books and social media. They found a Lily Thompson in Cincinnati, a 48-year-old artist whose profile picture showed a woman with blonde curls and a wistful smile. It was her, the woman from the photograph. Ethan's heart raced. What would she know? What could she tell him about his mother's life? "We should go to her," Caleb said, his voice gentle but firm. "If she has answers, she's our best shot at understanding Clara's wishes and maybe even winning this case." Ethan nodded, but fear gnawed at him. Meeting Lily meant facing a truth he'd never imagined. His mother's love, her secrets, her pain, it was all tied to this woman. And yet, the thought of knowing her, of hearing her story, felt like a chance to reclaim a piece of Clara. As they planned their trip to Cincinnati, Ethan caught Caleb's gaze lingering on him, soft and unguarded. For a moment, the room felt smaller, the air charged with something unspoken. Ethan's chest tightened, not with fear, but with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. He pushed it aside. There was too much at stake, too many truths to uncover. Tomorrow, they'd drive to Cincinnati. Tomorrow, Ethan would meet the woman who'd held his mother's heart. And maybe, just maybe, he'd find the strength to face whatever came next. The road to Cincinnati stretched endlessly before Ethan and Caleb, the Ohio countryside blurring into fields of gold and green. Ethan gripped the passenger seat of Caleb's beat-up sedan, the photograph of his mother and Lily tucked into his jacket. Every mile brought him closer to a truth he wasn't sure he could bear. Caleb drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, but Ethan could feel his presence like a quiet anchor. Last night, in Caleb's office, something had shifted between them, a fleeting moment of connection that Ethan couldn't name. He shoved the thought down, focusing instead on the woman they were about to meet. Lily Thompson, his mother's love. They arrived at a small, weathered house on the outskirts of Cincinnati, its porch adorned with wind chimes and potted plants. Ethan's heart pounded as he knocked on the door. A woman answered, blonde curls now streaked with gray, her blue eyes warm but cautious. It was her. "Lily, you must be Ethan," she said, her voice soft, tinged with a sadness that made Ethan's chest ache. "You look so much like Clara." Inside, the house smelled of lavender and old books. Lily led them to a cozy living room, where paintings lined the walls, vibrant landscapes that felt alive with emotion. She gestured for them to sit, her hands trembling slightly. "I've been waiting for you," she said. "Clara told me you'd come one day." Ethan's throat tightened. You knew my mother," the letter said. He faltered, unsure how to ask about a love he'd never known. Lily's eyes glistened. "Clara was my everything. We met 20 years ago, at an art gallery in Dayton. She was vibrant, fearless, but trapped in a marriage that dimmed her light. We loved in secret. Because Richard, he wouldn't have understood. Caleb leaned forward, his voice gentle. What happened between them? Why did Clara stay with him? Lily sighed, her gaze distant. Richard found out about us. He threatened to take Ethan away, to ruin Clara's life. She stayed to protect you, Ethan. But she never stopped fighting for you. She wrote that to make sure you'd have a future free of him. Ethan's mind spun. His mother had sacrificed her happiness for him. The weight of it was crushing. Why didn't she tell me? He whispered. She wanted to, Lily said. But she was afraid. Afraid you'd hate her. Or that Richard would use it against you. She left that letter with Margaret, hoping you'd find me when you were ready. Caleb pulled out a notebook, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. Lily, do you have anything that could help our case? Documents, letters, anything proving Clara's intentions. Lily nodded and disappeared into another room. She returned with a small wooden box, its lid carved with a willow tree. Inside were letters, photographs, and a notarized documented draft of Clara's original will, naming Ethan as the sole beneficiary. She gave this to me before she got sick, Lily said. She said it was her insurance policy, in case Richard tried to take everything. Ethan's hands shook as he read the will. It was real, undeniable. His mother had fought for him, even in her final days. Tears stung his eyes, and he felt Caleb's hand brush his arm, a silent gesture of support. Back in the car, Ethan clutched the box, his mind racing. This could win the case, he said, his voice hoarse. But it's more than that. It's her. Caleb nodded, his eyes soft. She loved you, Ethan, and she loved Lily. That's what this fight is about, honoring her truth. The drive back to Dayton was quiet, the weight of Lily's revelations settling between them. Ethan glanced at Caleb, his profile lit by the fading sunlight. There was a steadiness to him, a warmth that made Ethan feel seen in a way he hadn't in years. He wanted to say something, to name the feeling growing in his chest, but the words wouldn't come. Back in Dayton, they spent the evening in Caleb's office, preparing to present the new evidence. The will, the letters, Lily's testimony. It was a lifeline, a chance to reclaim Clara's legacy. But as they worked, Ethan's thoughts kept drifting to his mother's secret life. She'd loved fiercely, defiantly, despite the world's judgment. It made him wonder what else he'd been too afraid to face. As they packed up for the night, Caleb hesitated, then spoke. Ethan, I know this is a lot, but you're not alone in this. I'm here. Okay. Ethan met his gaze, his heart stuttering. I know, he said softly. And I'm glad it's you. Caleb's smile was small but genuine. And for a moment, the world felt less heavy. Tomorrow, they'd face the courtroom again, armed with Clara's truth. But tonight, Ethan let himself hold onto the warmth of Caleb's words, a quiet promise of something more. The courtroom felt smaller today, the walls closing in as Ethan sat beside Caleb, the wooden box from Lily resting on the table. Clara's will, the real one, lay inside, a testament to her love and defiance. Ethan's pulse thrummed with hope and dread, knowing this day could unravel everything. Caleb stood, his voice steady as he addressed the judge. Your Honor, we have new evidence, a notarized will from Clara Harper, predating the one presented by Richard Harper. It names Ethan as the sole beneficiary, and we have a witness to corroborate its authenticity. The judge raised an eyebrow, her gaze shifting to Richard, who sat rigid, his knuckles white. His lawyer protested, but Caleb was unshaken, presenting the will and Lily's letters. Ethan watched as Caleb handed over the documents. his movements precise but laced with a quiet passion. It struck Ethan how much Caleb cared not just about the case, but about him. Lily took the stand, her presence commanding despite her soft demeanor. She spoke of Clara's love, her sacrifices, and the threats Richard had made when he discovered their relationship. Clara stayed with him to protect Ethan, Lily said, her voice breaking. But she never stopped loving Heimer. The courtroom was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Ethan's chest tightened, his mother's secret life now laid bare before strangers. He glanced at Richard, expecting anger, but saw something else: fear. For the first time, his father looked small, exposed. During a recess, Ethan stepped outside, needing air. Caleb followed, his gray sweater catching the autumn chill. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. Ethan nodded, though his hands shook. "It's just hearing it in there. It makes it real. She loved Lily, and she hid it to protect me. I don't know how to feel." Caleb stepped closer, his hazel eyes steady. "You don't have to have it all figured out. You're allowed to feel everything: anger, love, grief. Clara wanted you to know her truth. That's what matters." Ethan looked at him, the words stirring something deep. Caleb's belief in him, his quiet strength, felt like a lifeline. Without thinking, Ethan reached out, his hand brushing Caleb's. The touch was brief, electric, and Ethan pulled back, his face warm. Caleb didn't push, but his smile held a warmth that lingered. Back in court, Richard's lawyer tried to discredit Lily, calling her testimony biased. But Caleb was relentless, presenting bank records that matched Lily's account of Richard's threats and financial manipulations. The judge's expression grew stern, her pen tapping as she listened. As the day ended, the judge announced she'd review the new evidence overnight. Ethan felt a flicker of hope, but also a gnawing fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if Richard's lies held stronger than Clara's truth? That evening, Ethan invited Caleb to his apartment. A rare gesture. The space was sparsely couch, a coffee table, a shelf of Clara's old jazz records. They sat with takeout, the tension of the day easing slightly. Ethan played one of Clara's favorites, a Billie Holiday record, its soulful notes filling the room. "She loved this song," Ethan said, his voice soft. "She danced to it in the kitchen, like the world couldn't touch her." Caleb smiled, leaning back. "She sounds like she was fearless, in her own way." Ethan nodded, his eyes on the record player. "I wish I'd known about Lily. I wish she'd told me." Caleb set his food down, his gaze steady. "She told you now, in her own way, and you're honoring her by fighting for this." Ethan met his eyes, the room suddenly small. "Why do you care so much?" "Caleb, this case, it's more than just pro bono for you." Caleb hesitated, then spoke, his voice low. "Because I see you, Ethan. I see how much you loved her, how hard you're fighting. And I care about you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Ethan's heart raced, a mix of fear and longing. He wanted to say something, to bridge the gap, but the weight of the day off Clara's secrets, the trial, held him back. Instead, he reached for the wooden box, pulling out one of Lily's letters. "Read this," he said, handing it to Caleb. It was a love letter, Clara's words to Lily, filled with tenderness and regret. As Caleb read, his eyes softened, and Ethan felt a strange relief. Sharing this felt like sharing Clara, like letting someone else hold her memory. Tomorrow, they'd face the judge's ruling. Tomorrow, Ethan might reclaim his mother's legacy. But tonight, with Caleb beside him, he felt something, a spark of courage, a hint of something more than friendship. It scared him, but it also felt right, like a piece of his mother's fearless heart beating in his own. Morning light filtered through the courtroom blinds, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Ethan sat beside Caleb, his hands clenched, the weight of the impending ruling pressing against his chest. Today could end the fight or shatter everything he'd uncovered about his mother. The judge entered, her face unreadable. After reviewing the evidence, she began. I find the original will presented by Richard Harper to be inconsistent with the notarized document provided by the plaintiff. The court rules in favor of Ethan Harper. Relief crashed over Ethan like a wave, but it was short-lived. The judge continued. However, Richard Harper is ordered to provide a full accounting of the estate's assets. A follow-up hearing will determine restitution. Ethan's heart sank. Richard's smug glance told him this wasn't over. The man had hidden assets before. He'd do it again. Caleb leaned close, his voice steady. This is a win. Ethan, we've got the will recognized. We'll keep fighting. Outside, Ethan paced the courthouse steps, frustration simmering. He's going to hide everything, he said. He'll drain the accounts, just like he did before. Caleb's hand grazed his arm, grounding him. We'll find the money. Lily's testimony. The bank records it's all building a case. He can't run forever. Ethan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, tangled in Clara's letter and Lily's stories. His mother's love for Lily wasn't just a secret, it was a rebellion against Richard's control. Ethan felt a surge of pride, but also grief for the life she'd been forced to hide. That afternoon, they returned to Lily's house in Cincinnati, seeking more clues. Lily welcomed them with tea, her eyes still carrying that quiet sorrow. There's something else, she said, leading them to her attic. She pulled out a locked diary, its leather cover worn but intact. Clara gave this to me before she passed. She said it held the truth about Richard. Ethan's hands trembled as he opened it. The pages were filled with Clara's handwriting notes about Richard's threats, his financial schemes, even a list of offshore accounts she'd discovered. One entry stopped Ethan cold. He knew about Lily and me. He said he'd ruin us both if I left. I stayed for Ethan, but I'll make sure he's free. Caleb read over his shoulder, his breath catching. This is it, Ethan. This could prove fraud beyond the will. Lily's voice was soft. Clara was brave, but she was scared. She wanted you to have a life where you could love freely, without fear. Ethan's eyes stung. He thought of his mother, trapped in a marriage to protect him, hiding her heart to keep him safe. And now, he was fighting to honor that sacrifice. He looked at Caleb, whose steady presence had become his anchor. There was something in Caleb's gaze, something that mirrored Clara's defiance, her courage to love despite the odds. That evening, back in Dayton, Ethan and Caleb worked late, cross-referencing Clara's diary with bank records. The diary's details were damning: account numbers, dates, even names of Richard's associates. Ethan felt a fire growing in him, need to not just win, but to expose every lie Richard had told. As they worked, Caleb's hand brushed Ethan's, lingering a moment longer than necessary. Ethan's heart raced, but this time, he didn't pull away. Caleb, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this? Why go this far for me? Caleb's eyes met his, unguarded. Because you deserve justice. And because I see you, Ethan, not just as a client, as you. The words hit Ethan like a spark, igniting something he'd been too afraid to name. He thought of his mother, of Lily, of the love they'd fought for in secret. Maybe it was time for him to be brave, too. He leaned closer, his breath unsteady. I see you, too. Caleb's smile was soft, tentative. They didn't kiss not yet, but the air between them crackled with possibility. Ethan felt a rush of fear and exhilaration, like stepping into a part of himself he'd never explored. They turned back to the diary, but the moment lingered. A quiet promise. Tomorrow, they'd present the new evidence, armed with Clara's words. Tomorrow, Ethan would fight not just for his inheritance, but for the truth of who his mother was and who he might become. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Ethan and Caleb prepared to present Clara's diary. Its pages, filled with her meticulous notes, were a weapon against Richard's lies. Ethan's heart pounded not just for the case, but for the unspoken connection growing between him and Caleb. Caleb stood, his voice clear and commanding. Your Honor, we have new evidence, Clara Harper's personal diary, detailing Richard Harper's financial manipulations and threats. It corroborates our claims of fraud and provides specific account details. Richard's face paled as Caleb submitted the diary. His lawyer scrambled, objecting to its admissibility, but the judge silenced him with a sharp look. I'll allow it, she said. This court seeks the truth. Ethan watched his father squirm, the man who'd once loomed so large now shrinking under scrutiny. Clara's words, her truth, were tearing down his facade. Ethan felt a surge of pride. Fought for him, even in secret, and now he was fighting for her. During a break, Ethan and Caleb stepped into the hallway. Ethan's hands shook, adrenaline coursing through him. We're close, he said. I can feel it. Caleb nodded, his hazel eyes steady. We are. But Ethan, whatever happens, you've already honored her. You've brought her truth to light. Ethan's chest tightened. Caleb's words, his unwavering support, stirred something deep, a longing he could no longer ignore. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap between them, but the weight of the trial held him back. Not yet, he thought, but soon. Back in court, Caleb called a forensic accountant who'd traced the offshore accounts listed in Clara's diary. The accountant's testimony was damning, millions funneled into hidden accounts, all tied to Richard. The judge's expression grew grim, and Ethan felt hope flare brighter than ever. But Richard wasn't done. His lawyer produced a surprise witness, a former colleague of Clara's who claimed she'd been unstable, prone to exaggeration. Clara fabricated stories to hurt Richard. The witness said, that diary can't be trusted. Ethan's blood boiled. He wanted to shout, to defend his mother. But Caleb's hand on his arm kept him grounded. They're desperate, Caleb whispered. This won't hold. Caleb cross-examined the witness, exposing inconsistencies in her story. She faltered, admitting she'd been paid by Richard's lawyer. The courtroom gasped, and Richard's composure cracked, his face red with fury. As the day ended, the judge announced a final hearing in 2 days to deliver her ruling on the estate's assets. Ethan left the courthouse, his mind a whirlwind. They were so close, but Richard's desperation made him unpredictable. What else would he try? That night, Ethan invited Caleb to the diner. Needing a break from the tension, they sat in their usual booth, the neon lights casting a warm glow. Ethan played with his coffee mug, his thoughts on Clara, Lily, and the man beside him. Caleb, he said, his voice low, when this is over, I want to figure out what this is. He gestured between them, his heart racing. Caleb's eyes softened, a smile tugging at his lips. I'd like that, he said, but let's get you through this first. You deserve to win this for Clara. For you. Ethan nodded, warmth spreading through him. For the first time, he felt ready to face not just his father, but his own heart. He thought of Clara and Lily, Their love a quiet rebellion against a world that tried to silence them. Maybe he could be that brave, too. They spent the evening talking not about the case, but about music, dreams, the small things that made them human. Ethan shared stories of Clara's jazz records, her late-night dances. Caleb spoke of his own struggles, coming out in a small town, finding his place as a lawyer who fought for the underdog. Each word built a bridge between them, fragile but real. As they parted, Caleb's hand lingered on Ethan's shoulder, a promise in his touch. 2 days, he said. We'll finish this. Ethan nodded, clutching the diary in his bag. 2 days until the truth would be laid bare. 2 days until he could reclaim his mother's legacy and maybe, just maybe, start building his own. The final hearing loomed like a storm on the horizon. Ethan sat in his apartment. Clara's diary opened before him, its pages a map of her courage and pain. He felt her presence in every word, urging him to finish what she'd started. Caleb arrived early, his gray sweater swapped for a sharp blazer, his hazel eyes bright with determination. Ready? He asked, his voice a steady anchor. Ethan nodded, though his stomach churned. Let's end this. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Richard sat stone-faced, his lawyer whispering urgently beside him. Ethan's gaze drifted to the wooden box on the table, holding Clara's will and Lily's letters. It was more than evidence, sight was his mother's heart, laid bare for the world. The judge began, her voice measured. This case has revealed significant evidence of fraud, based on Clara Harper's diary, the notarized will, and financial records. I rule that Richard Harper illegally manipulated the estate. All assets are to be restored to Ethan Harper, as per Clara's original intentions. A gasp rippled through the room. Ethan's heart soared, but Richard stood, his voice sharp. This is a lie. Clara was delusional, manipulated by that woman. The judge's gavel silenced him. Mr. Harper, you will refrain from outbursts, or you'll be held in contempt. Caleb squeezed Ethan's hand under the table, a fleeting touch that grounded him. The judge continued, ordering Richard to pay restitution and face a separate investigation for fraud. Ethan watched his father deflate, the man who'd stolen so much finally stripped of power. As the courtroom emptied, Ethan lingered, the weight of victory sinking in. He'd won not just the house, the money, but Clara's truth. He turned to Caleb, gratitude and something deeper swelling in his chest. I couldn't have done this without you. Caleb's smile was soft, his eyes warm. You did this, Ethan. You fought for her. Outside, the Ohio sky was gray, but Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. He and Caleb walked to the diner, their steps in sync. Over coffee, Ethan opened the wooden box, pulling out the photograph of Clara and Lily. I want to honor them, he said. Not just the inheritance, but their love. Caleb nodded, his hand resting near Ethan's on the table. You already are. By fighting. By seeing her truth, giving her the freedom she couldn't have. Ethan's throat tightened. He thought of Clara's sacrifices, her hidden love, and the courage it took to write that letter. He looked at Caleb, his heart pounding. I've been scared, he admitted. Scared of what this means, of who I might be. But you make me want to be brave. Caleb's eyes held his, steady and sure. You already are, Ethan, and I'm not going anywhere. This time, Ethan didn't pull back. He leaned across the table, his lips meeting Caleb's in a soft, tentative kiss. It was brief, but it felt like a Beganinga promise to himself, to Clara, to love without fear. They spent the afternoon planning. Ethan wanted to restore Clara's house, turn it into a space for art and music. A tribute to her and Lily. Caleb offered to help, his legal mind already mapping out the details. As they talked, Ethan felt a new kind of hope, not just for the future, but for himself. That evening, Ethan visited Lily, bringing her the news of the ruling. She wept, holding the photograph of her and Clara. "She'd be so proud of you," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given her peace." Ethan hugged her, feeling Clara's presence in the warmth of the moment. He left with a promise to stay in touch, to keep their story alive. Back home, Ethan played one of Clara's records, the jazz notes filling the room. He thought of her courage, her love, and the man who'd stood by him through it all. Caleb was more than a lawyer, more than a friend. He was a chance at something new, something real. Tomorrow, they'd start rebuilding Clara's house, their lives, maybe even a love of their own. For now, Ethan let the music carry him, knowing he'd found his mother's truth and a piece of his own. Spring arrived in Dayton, painting the town with soft greens and blooming flowers. Ethan stood outside Clara's house, now its faded paint and sagging porch a canvas for new beginnings. Beside him, Caleb held a toolbox, his smile bright against the morning sun. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. With the lawsuit won, Ethan had reclaimed the house, the savings, and Clara's vinyl collection. But more than that, he'd reclaimed her story. The wooden box sat on the porch, holding her will, her letters, and the photograph of her and Lily. It was a reminder of what he'd fought for and what he was building now. Ethan and Caleb had grown closer, their bond deepening through late-night talks and shared dreams. The kiss in the diner had been the first of many, each one a step towards something Ethan hadn't dared imagine before. Caleb's patience, his quiet strength, made Ethan feel safe to explore this new part of himself. They'd spent weeks planning the house's restoration. Ethan wanted it to be a community space, a place for music, art, and stories like Clara's and Lily's. Lily had visited often, bringing sketches and ideas, her presence a bridge to Clara's past. Together, they'd decided to name it Willow House, after the tree where Clara and Lily had fallen in love. Today was the first day of renovations. Ethan picked up a paint roller, his hands steady despite the weight of the moment. Caleb worked beside him, sanding down the porch railing, his laughter mingling with the hum of a jazz record playing inside. It was one of Clara's favorites, its notes a thread connecting past and present. As they worked, Ethan thought of his mother's diary, now safely stored in the house. Its pages had not only won the case, but given him a deeper understanding of her. Clara had loved fiercely, despite fear, despite Richard's cruelty. Her courage inspired Ethan to live openly, to embrace his feelings for Caleb without shame. By midday, Lily arrived, carrying a tray of sandwiches. She looked at the house, her eyes shining. "Clara would love this," she said. She always dreamed of a place where people could be themselves. Ethan smiled, his heart full. That's what this is for. For her. For you. For anyone who needs it. Caleb set down his tools, wiping sweat from his brow. And for you, Ethan. You're building something beautiful. Ethan met his gaze, warmth spreading through him. We're building it, he corrected, his voice soft but sure. That evening, they sat on the porch, the air cool and fragrant with spring. Lily shared stories of Clara, her stubborn streak, her love for late-night drives, the way she'd hum jazz tunes off-key. Ethan laughed, feeling closer to his mother than ever. Caleb's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. As the sun set, Ethan looked at the house, its windows glowing with promise. He thought of the courtroom, the diary, The letter that had changed everything. He'd sued his father for stealing his inheritance. But he'd gained so much more truth about his mother. A love he hadn't expected. And a future he could shape. Clara would be proud. Lily said, echoing her words from months ago. Ethan nodded, squeezing Caleb's hand. I hope so. I'm trying to live the way she wanted, free. Caleb leaned closer, his voice a whisper. You are, Ethan. And it's beautiful. They kissed under the fading light, the jazz record playing softly inside. Willow House stood behind them, a testament to Clara's love, Lily's resilience, and Ethan's courage. It wasn't just a house, it was a home for truths too long hidden, for love too long denied. As night fell, Ethan felt a peace he hadn't known since Clara's death. He'd fought for her legacy, and in doing so, he'd found his own. With Caleb by his side, Lily's stories in his heart, and Clara's music in the air, Ethan knew he was exactly where he was meant to believing, loving, free.